Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to HBL. For today's lesson, we are going to look at Japan under militarist rule. So please turn to your textbook to page 105. Okay, we're going to cover some of the content from that part of the textbook. Now, here are some essential questions that we're going to think about as we embark on this segment of Japanese military rule. The first question really is that how did the militarists in Japan establish control in Japan? In other words, how do they control the people through economic policies? How did they control the people through even political or social policies? So it's about control. The second thing we're going to consider also is that how did the militarists consolidate military power in the government? In other words, how did they secure their power so that they will not be easily overthrown? Okay, so later on you will see through the political means there are some way that they actually consolidate their power and secure their power. Now, as we look at the military and their rule over Japan, we are also going to look at the political, economic, and social impact. Now, of course, when we look at the political, economic, and social impact, there will be some areas that will be positive. There are some areas that will be negative. All right. So let's begin. Now, we're going to look at consolidation of military power in the government. So turn to page 105. And consolidation is really a political impact. So what happened was that, of course, within the government, the military's influence starts to increase. Okay, in other words, there are more and more military personnel who's now part of the government, part of the cabinet, influencing decisions, influencing political decisions. And they had increasing support from the people. And if you can recall the last lesson, remember the military basically took over Manchuria, even though the civilian government did not really like this. But because they took over Manchuria and it was a military success, the public was extremely pleased with the military. Now, slowly but surely, military officers now could take positions in the service now. Okay, and so you can see that the military presence begin to increase within the government. Party differences actually made it hard for the civilian politicians to stop the dominance of the military because the parties, the different political parties who are led by civilians, they often fight against one another. And because they were fighting against one another and because there's so much differences, the military now could take advantage of this, right? From 1935, and this is part of consolidation, basically the military went about this thing known as the electoral purification. In essence, basically, they were trying to purge people that were anti-military or groups of people who supported socialism and communism. So you can see quite similar to Hitler. Hitler also went about trying to attack the Jews and even purge the communists. In the same way, the Japanese here, of course, there are no Jews, but the Japanese here were purging a lot of the civilian and all of the people that are socialists and communists because socialism and communism, in some sense, their ideology goes against the military's fascist ideology. All right. Now, slowly but surely, political parties became less important, and even fewer Japanese bothered to vote because the Japanese now had more confidence in the military, all right? And they had more confidence that the military should be the one that should be leading the government. Now, if you look at the military was largely divided into two camps. One camp was known as the Imperial Way faction, and another camp was known as the Control faction. All right. And we're going to move on into an incident known as the February 26th incident in 1936. So what happened was that a group of young officers in the Imperial Way faction tried to launch a military coup. It means basically launch a military coup to take over the government. They aimed to restore Japan's glory by honoring the emperor and defending the empire. Now the coup failed, and 19 leading figures in the Imperial Way faction was arrested, tried, and executed. Now, because of this February 26 incident that occurred, it paved the way for the control faction to emerge. So remember, there's a rivalry, right, between the two groups, the Imperial Way and the control faction. But now, because of this failed coup, the Imperial Way got weakened, and the control faction slowly began to gain more power. So the Imperial Way faction started to lose its influence within the army, and it gave the control faction the opportunity to seize control of the military and restore discipline within the military. Now, the control faction could appoint an active general as the Minister of War. Now, in the past, the Minister of War used to be a non-military person, and sometimes it can be good because you don't want a person to be in charge of the military to be always thinking about war. But now, what happened is that a general becomes the Minister of War, and the general now can make strategic military decisions for Japan. And if you put a general in this position, obviously you can see the future. The policies will be more and more aggressive. Now, later on, this person is quite important because he's the one that's going to lead Japan into World War II, the leader of the control faction, General Tojo Hidaki. And he was first the army minister, but later on, in 1941, he became prime minister. And he will be the one that will later on lead Japan into war against the USA. Right? Now, of course, what this means is that the civilian politicians will start to lose their political power. And more Japanese start to support the military officers and their expansionist plans. Expansionist plans into China, and later on, even expansionist plans into Southeast Asia. In 1937, Prince Kono Fumimaro was then appointed the PM, and he is the one that basically supported the military-led invasion into China. And Prince Kono also permitted the formation of a cabinet planning office. And later on, this cabinet planning office will make a lot of decisions that would put Japan into war. So we have come to the end of this very short lesson. So as we look back, how did the militarists in Japan establish political control in Japan? Okay, you can recall some of the points. They slowly take up positions in the civilian posts. Okay, the military or the control faction emerged as the one that really would dominate the government. All right, and so basically, because of this, increasingly, rule in Japan will become more and more militaristic, and later on, rule in Japan will become more aggressive. Later on, in 1937, they will invade China. And later on, 1941, they'll attack Pearl Harbor and then invade whole of Southeast Asia. Okay, so that comes to the end of the lesson. There are some MCQ questions that you need to do. So please do the MCQ questions, and that's the end of HBL for today. Thank you so much.